All right, thank you all so much. Super excited to welcome this guest today. You all know that I just am very passionate about nutrition. We had a wonderful time working through Blue Zones together and watching those episodes. So today we have Tara Coleman here, certified nutritionist, and she's going to tell you all kinds of great stuff. So please welcome Tara.
Guys, I can't believe there's so many people here. Usually I only get this turnout if there's like free food or something like that. Maybe something we catered in. I gotta go. Well, first of all, before I get started, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. Not because I like talking about myself, I'd actually very much prefer not to. But in the world of nutrition, there's a lot of information and there's a lot of opinions. And I think it's very important to kind of assess where your information's coming from before you accept it. So I want to tell you a little bit about my background just so you understand where I'm coming from and you can decide if you want to believe anything that I'm saying. Does that sound good? Well, I did not start out as a nutritionist. I was very much a normal kind of fast food kid. My undergrad is in biology. I started my career as a chemist and did that for a number of years and, wore my lab coat, did all the things. But one year I got some personal lab results back that I wasn't really happy with. My cholesterol had shot through the roof, my CRP level was high, and essentially I was showing some warning signs for heart disease at a very young age. So my doctor called me and said, what are you doing? What is happening? You need to watch your diet, you need to stay active, or you're gonna get heart disease very young. And so I was literally in the parking lot of my gym when I got that phone call. So active wasn't a big deal, but I never really thought about food at that point. I think I was in my late 20s, so I was still quite invincible. But I figured, how hard can this be? I'm a scientist. I'll read a book. I'll get this dialed in. I'll go on the internet. And I tried. I read a lot of different things. They all said something different. I felt very discouraged and overwhelmed and honestly a little bit sad because I wanted help but I couldn't find it. So at that point, I decided to go back to school. And really what I found was, everyone wants this one size fits all solution. And honestly, if someone finds it, right on. You would not find anyone happier than me. It would make my life so much easier. But even if I believe we should all eat the same, which I don't think you should eat the way that you eat necessarily. But even if I did, there's also the logistical part of eating, right? Some people love to cook. Some people hate to cook. Some people, I don't know, live alone. Some people are with a family. Some people are picky eaters. Some people eat anything. So that's really what I specialize in. So today, what my intention is to go through, unfortunately, a little bit of science. I still have that scientist in me, so I promise it'll be quick and easy. So you understand kind of what's happening in your body. And then I want to spend a lot of time on how do you actually use this information? And really, I want to encourage you to ask questions. I do have a full presentation. You can have the slides if you would like. And if this turns into us just sitting and talking and me answering your questions, it would make my day. There is plenty of time for Q&A at the end, but my sole purpose for this next hour and a half or however long I'm with you is to be as valuable as possible. So if anything isn't helpful or if you have something, please jump in. You're not gonna hurt my feelings. Is that something like a good plan of action? Awesome. All right, well, let's dig into this quick science part. I like to start out talking about kind of what happens when we eat. And so if you could go to the next slide real quick. Please forgive me, that's a very dramatic entrance. Okay, so what happens when we eat? We know this. The first part of digestion is physical, right? This is chewing, right? And the sole purpose of this is to take a really big piece of food and to break into a small piece of food. Now, at that point, what we do next is swallow. If you could go to the next slide. So basically, what's happening when we're chewing is there's saliva, right? And if we were to look at all food under a microscope, it would look like these string of sugars. Not very appetizing, but that's what it would look like. So in our saliva, there's these things called enzymes, which are kind of like scissors, right? And the enzymes come and they break these long strings of sugar into smaller strings of sugar. The reason it does that, if you could go to the next slide. Okay. The reason it does that is so it can be absorbed into the bloodstream, right? So you have food that goes into your mouth, it goes into your stomach, and then it gets absorbed into the bloodstream. If you remember, food is energy. So your bloodstream is like the transport system that's going to take the energy to your brain, it's going to take it to your hands. At this point, it's called blood sugar. I'm sure all of you have heard that word quite a bit. And really what that is, it's the energy in the transport system in your body. If you go to the next slide. Now, at that point, we can only function with a narrow range of sugar in our bloodstream. If there's too much energy, that's a problem. If our blood sugar is too high, or if our blood sugar is too low, that's a problem as well. And so the part of your body that handles this is insulin. It's insulin's job to kind of regulate this, to say, oh my goodness, too much blood sugar, no worries. I'm going to take this blood sugar, I'm going to open up the cell, I'm going to pull it out of the bloodstream, I'm going to put it in the cell where it'll either be used as energy if you're moving or stored as fat. Okay? If you go to the next slide. So if everything you eat is going to turn into this, which it is, I don't care if it's broccoli or chocolate cake. Why would you ever pick broccoli over chocolate cake? Come on, it's just you and me. We know. So it's not really what it's going to turn into. It's the speed at which it does it, right? If you go to the next slide. From a general health, wellness, longevity, and weight management standpoint, we want that process to be slower, right? So the time where you take a bite, you're chewing, amylase comes along or the enzymes come along, chop it up, it gets absorbed into your bloodstream. We want to slow that down. If you go to the next slide. So the things that slow it down, you can just go click it 3 times. First, the fiber content. The more fiber a food has, the slower it's going to take to digest. The type of sugar, fruit has a ton of sugar in it, right? But it's a little bit different than table sugar. So it's going to process a little bit slower. And the extent to the extent it's been processed or prepared. If you go to the next slide. As a general rule of thumb, the closer something is to its natural form, the slower it's going to break down. So you can just click through all 3. So for instance, let's take an apple, right? An apple is in its natural form. I'm sure most of you have seen an apple tree, or at least on the internet, if not in real life. And so it has fiber, right? And it's going to break down slower. It has the good sugar. And so this is going to give us a long-term energy rather than a short-term energy. Applesauce still has fiber. It's been a little bit more broken down, so it's going to process a little bit faster. Apple juice, very, very quickly. No fiber, a little bit denser in sugar. I'm not saying apples are good and apple juice is bad by any means, but if you're sitting, at your desk, if you're watching TV for the day, if you need a slow energy, an apple is probably a good option. Honestly, if you've ever seen someone kind of go into a diabetic shock and you need to get their blood sugar up quickly, please don't give them an apple, give them some apple juice. That'll increase it, okay? And again, what this means is it's a long-term energy rather than short-term. Helps keep your blood sugar stable, which is great for mood, concentration, and weight management. Go to the next slide. Okay, so this is a different way of looking at it. So let's say you wake up and it's, I don't know, Blue Donut Day. You're like, Friday is Blue Donut Day at my house. This is a a food that is very dense in sugar, right? It has 0 fiber, I'm assuming. So if you go, it's going to break down very, very quickly. This right here is your fasting blood sugar. If you could click the next thing. So all of this sugar is going to rush into your bloodstream, right? And remember, I said that our body can only handle a narrow range of sugar. So insulin comes along, go ahead and click the next slide, and says, okay, let's go ahead and deal with it. But it kind of freaks out, right? Because there's so much sugar. So it calls the pancreas to produce more insulin. Now you have this whole army of insulin that's coming to deal with this sugar problem, right? And guess what? Our bodies do a really good job. And so now, if you can click, now that it brings all the sugar from the bloodstream into the cell and your blood sugar has dropped. And again, remember, we can't deal with this either. If you go to the next slide. Now, remember I said that low blood sugar isn't good. We have a lot of hormones to deal with this. You'll notice these as our stress hormones, right? Because our body is in a little bit of a danger zone. Things like adrenaline, cortisol. The side effect of these hormones is they cause us to crave sugar. Now, you know this. Have you ever been really, really hungry? Do you want a salad or do you want a blue donut? Right. So you get stuck if you could click. So it raises it back up and you're stuck really on this sort of train, right? If you could go ahead and click again. This is the danger zone. The color is a little bit weird, but it is a pink blob. So I always like to refer like, oh my gosh, I'm in the pink blob. This is your out of control feeling. Physically, it might manifest in like shakiness, it might manifest in confusion, or it might manifest in like being a cookie monster. You probably see this, historically, maybe in your kids, maybe in your grandkids, when they're gorgeous, wonderful little kids and they turn into the scariest people in the world, right? It's usually because they're starving. Guess what? It happens to us as well, but we have credit cards and, cars and we can get to places. And so over time, this sort of blood sugar roller coaster leads to basically we make the insulin, we eat the food, we make the insulin, the cell becomes a little bit more resistant to insulin. Then we make more insulin, we feel kind of fatigued, we crave sugar. Over and over, this does lead to things like prediabetes and diabetes. It is also the root cause, if you go to the next slide, for a lot of our health concerns, right? Blood pressure goes up, triglycerides, increases heart disease, that kind of abdominal fat, makes your arterial walls thicker, right? And so, if you go to the next slide. Now for you guys, it doesn't look like any of you have blue donut grease in your face. So I'm assuming that's probably not a normal breakfast of yours. But even if you're eating all the right things, right? Let's say you are really focused on health, which clearly you guys are here at 1:30 on a Friday without free food. So clearly you care about it. You're eating all the right things. If you go too long without eating, you'll still end up in this blue zone. Please go to the next. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that is usually, sometimes it's good intentions, right? Sometimes it's like, I want to lose a couple pounds, I want to take care of myself. Sometimes it's mismanagement of hunger, like I left my snacks at home. A lot of times it's distraction, right? Or even as we get older, our hunger signals get a little bit wonky, right? So maybe you just kind of forget that you're hungry, and then all of a sudden you're a little shaky or snapping at people, which is what happens to me. So go to the next slide, please. In fact, and so like I said, when you're down in this danger zone, what you're craving is carbs and sugar, right? And typically we misinterpret this. We misinterpret this as lack of willpower or self-control or sugar addiction or carb addiction, or we say all sorts of mean stuff to ourselves. But in fact, it's actually the majority of our sweet and carb cravings come from a diet that is too low in calories. Go ahead. Doesn't that seem kind of weird? Like we always think we should be eating less, but sometimes, I mean, maybe this doesn't apply to you guys, but it applies to me. We start the day being like, you know what today is? Today's Monday. I'm gonna have my egg whites and I'm gonna have a carrot stick and I'm gonna have a little salad for lunch. And then, 3 p.m. we're like digging for Halloween candy from last Halloween, trying to find it. So it's a really good intention, but it does catch up to us. Go ahead to the next slide. If you continue to eat too little earlier in the day, your symptoms are going to pop up later in the day. They're going to pop up in the afternoon or in the evening. And typically, I mean, I don't know if you saw before, I said that stress hormones are the things that are released. Adrenaline's a really emotional hormone, right? Think of the last time you got really scared. Maybe you were driving and someone cut you off, right? Maybe you yelled, maybe you cried. And in this case, it leads to a symptom that maybe we're not proud of, right? Like, oh, why did I eat all that Halloween candy again? Or I was just at my doctor's and I promised I wouldn't eat cookies all the time, and now I'm eating the cookies. And, we can confuse this with emotional eating. We can confuse this with lack of willpower and self-control, but it's really a mismanagement of hunger. So even though the symptoms later on, the problem is a little bit earlier in the day. Does that make sense? Does that click with you guys, or is that just happening in my life? Just mine. Okay, I'm just kidding. Okay, next one. Now, the other source of sweetened carb cravings is a diet that's too low in calories, click to the next, or too low in protein, okay? If you look at hunger as a problem to be solved, protein solves that problem. Protein is our satiety macronutrient. That's why you haven't heard anyone say, oh my gosh, I finished all the chicken breast in the house, keep it away from me. Or don't leave those eggs at my house because I'm just gonna barrel through them, right? We don't say that because it's very satiating. Carbohydrates are not, they are so important. They're extremely important. It's where our fiber comes from. It's where our vitamins and minerals come from. It's where most of our pleasure comes from, but it doesn't make us full. That's why we can eat very large volumes of it, right? So if you're eating for pleasure, right, please just have carbohydrates. If you're like, I'm hungry, and when I'm done with this meal, I want that problem to be solved, protein does need to be present. So one good rule of thumb is every time you eat, go to the next slide. Every time you eat, have something from the protein group and something from the carbohydrate group. So let's talk a little bit about what this means. So protein is animal protein. That's typically what we think of, right? We think of fish, we think of chicken, beef, things like that. It is things that come from animals, so dairy or eggs, but there's plenty of plant-based sources, right? Nuts, seeds, beans, lentils. So you do not need to be chewing on a leg every single time you eat in order to get protein. You certainly can, that's your choice. But there are plenty of plant-based sources. Now, carbohydrates, typically when we think of carbs, we think of bread, we think of pasta, crackers, things like that. That's true, but fruits and vegetables fall into the carbohydrate category as well. So what this means is carrots and hummus or an apple and peanut butter would meet this criteria just as much as chicken and rice or beef and potatoes. Okay? If you go to the next slide. Does that make sense? Do you guys have any questions about that? So the two places that this rule kind of falls through the cracks, at least in the American culture, right? For lunch and dinner, well, especially dinner, it tends to be kind of protein focused, right? Either meat focused, if you do eat animal protein, or if you are plant-based, usually there's, we're putting more effort into it. It's breakfast and snacks where this falls through the cracks. So breakfast should have something from the carbohydrate group and something from the protein group. Ideally, it's going to happen pretty early on in the day, within the first 2 hours, ideally within the first hour. Now, if this is challenging from a satiety standpoint, things like that, or from a hunger standpoint, let me know. We can come up with some strategies. And it should, and this is where people stop liking, this is where people start walking out the door. It should happen before, or at the very least, with your coffee. I'm not anti-coffee. If you guys are coffee drinkers, it is the best part of my day. I drink coffee. It is delicious. It is also an appetite suppressant. So oftentimes we'll wake up and we'll be like, oh, or this is how I wake up with my coffee. I'm just so happy about it. And then all of a sudden we look up and it's 11, a.m. and we haven't eaten anything and we're starving. So it's not that I'm anti-coffee, please, unless you shouldn't be drinking coffee, drink coffee. But if you don't have it with some food, you may not recognize those hunger signals until you're starving. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, good. I'm glad that I didn't lose anyone. And you guys
There's no chemical issue that prohibits it. So if you can have a couple cups of coffee and then have a hearty breakfast 2 hours later, mission accomplished.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now I would say the only thing I'd push back on, if you are struggling with maybe some anxiety or depression, oftentimes caffeine on an empty stomach can kind of be like throwing gasoline on it, right? So if that is something that is, I'm not saying if you have eggs with your coffee, all of a sudden the world's problems are solved. We have a lot of things that should be causing some anxiety right now, but I think that that's something that you can experiment with. You can be like, okay, gosh, I do get a little anxious midday, or I am feeling a little bit low, and we can talk more about how food impacts those emotions. But I would say, okay, with my coffee, I'm gonna have a kind bar, right? Breakfast doesn't have to be this big, bacon, eggs, toast situation. It can be, but it can also be something light. It can be like, okay, well, I'm not super hungry in the morning. Maybe I'll have a handful of nuts with my coffee and see, right? You may say, gosh, I didn't feel as anxious. Or you may say, no, my problems are bigger than coffee. Yes.
When you mentioned about coffee being an
Appetite suppressant?
appetite suppressant.
Yeah.
Are you talking about caffeinated or decaffeinated?
Ooh, it's typically the caffeine. The question that was asked was, I had mentioned that coffee was an appetite suppressant, and he asked if it was the caffeine part of it or just, so if decaf would perform the same. Typically, it's caffeine that pulls, that's the thing that pulls it down. But I mean, decaf could potentially impact it, but that's probably more psychological. You know, we get sort of like, I mean, decaf still makes you feel good, right? But yes, it was the caffeine. So it would hold true if you are a person that drinks tea in the morning, right? Or if you have some sort of other caffeinated beverage in the morning, this would hold true. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, you go to the next slide. All right, let's talk examples. Okay, oatmeal. Oatmeal is a great breakfast. I would add some nuts or some nut butters or hemp hearts. Do you guys know what hemp hearts are? Yeah. A plus. So hemp hearts, if any of you don't know, it's basically, you can find it at really any grocery store. You can find it at Costco. Yeah, I would try it first to make sure that you wanna, add that much hemp heart into your life.
They're good in smoothies too.
They're great in smoothies. They're basically, you can think of them, they don't really have much flavor. It's sort of like it looks like a cross between maybe like a sunflower seed and like couscous. And it is a great plant-based source of protein. It has a little bit of fiber, it has some omega-3 fatty acids. I like to add it to things where I don't want to change the flavor, but I want to get a little bit more protein, right? So if I love oatmeal, I'm going to put some of that in because I don't want to change the flavor of the oatmeal. Hemp hearts. Hemp hearts, yeah. Trader Joe's, they'll be called hemp seeds, but everywhere else they're called hemp hearts. Yes.
What about,
what about like raisins or cranberries, dried cranberries in your oatmeal?
That'd be a great thing to add. What it wouldn't be is a source of protein. So that would be adding more carbohydrates. That'd be adding some delicious flavor, a little bit of fiber. So you would still want to add some nuts to it. You would still want to add a protein source to it. PB2 is, I mean, you could add nut butter, but you can also add the powdered.
yeah,
I mean, I'm not anti peanut butter. I had it this morning. I mean, I'm pro peanut butter, but sometimes that mix is nice.
And that's to balance the blood sugar
Exactly.
response. So if it's too many carbs, then we get up and down.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So the protein is the speed bump, right? You have the quick energy and you want to do it the speed bump to be the long-term energy.
hemp hearts are also good in salads.
They are great in salads. Yeah. Yeah, it's like I said, it's a great way. She said that hemp hearts are really good in salads. Yeah, it's just like something really nice to sprinkle on. It's like a nutrient boost, but it doesn't really change the flavor.
Has a little bit of nice flavor.
Oh, well, okay. I eat them by themselves too, so I agree.
You know if they're gluten free?
They are.
They are gluten-free.
They are gluten-free, yes. Yeah.
So I want to throw some almonds in my oatmeal.
Yeah.
How many am I doing 6, 12, 24 pounds?
I would probably not a pound. Typically, I mean, I would probably do half an ounce to an ounce, which would be like 15 to 20. So that would be like eighth of a cup to a fourth of a cup
Of oatmeal? Dry
of the almonds.
hemp, yeah.
Mhm.
I saw Greek yogurt and then yogurt, so is there a difference in Greek yogurt and
Yeah.
just any other yogurt?
Yeah, there is. So Greek yogurt tends to be, the question was if there's a difference between Greek yogurt and yogurt. Greek yogurt tends to be a little bit higher in protein. It also tends to be a little bit thicker and a little bit tartar. So a little bit more tart, I guess is a better way of saying that. Tartar, not it.
Okay, we understood.
Yes, so not everyone likes it, right? And so if that's not your thing, doing ideally a plain yogurt, I would prefer for you to be adding your sweetness through honey or through fruit, in a perfect world. But if you were to do a plain yogurt, Icelandic yogurt's pretty popular now too, or European, it's gonna be a little bit thicker and creamier. But it's not gonna be very sweet.
I'm asking this question for Joanne.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know we
This
just
is
psychic
an
in the
inside
house. What am I
joke.
thinking now?
You can help me with the pronunciation. Is it kefir or kefir?
Yeah,
Or
great,
kefir? How does that stack up to Greek yogurt?
fantastic. Yeah, that would be a great source of protein. So kefir is essentially, it's like a probiotic drink, essentially. It's usually with the milk where you would
So
find
do a
it.
little advertising pitch here. There's a guy that hits the farmers markets and he lives in Tierrasanta and he sells kefir yogurt. And he's at Santee every Wednesday. He's in La Mesa every Friday. And Joanne is his best customer. She lives on the side.
It's so good. I think he's in, I live in Mission Valley and I think he comes there on Saturdays and he has like the chips and the hummus.
Yeah,
and
that guy
stuff like that.
he lives in Tierrasanta, that guy.
Oh,
No, this is strictly
okay.
refrigerated.
My guy has a little bit of both, but
Yeah,
I'm sure your guys.
he's got it all on ice and he's got 20, 25 flavors anymore.
So
So
good,
good.
so good. Yeah, that would be a great option. It also is good for gut health and digestive health. So yeah, so that's another example. So there's two places here that I used as examples with Greek yogurt. So one would be like a cereal or a granola. Ideally, I would like that balanced out with something with protein. Now, milk does have protein, it's just not as much. So if you can tolerate it, I would have some yogurt with it. Having a piece of toast, adding some nut butter, or something along those lines, or a smoothie. Smoothies are great. It's a great way to put in some vegetables. It's a great way to put in some fruit. But it needs to have a protein source, and oftentimes that's something that we forget. So you could use protein powder, you could add some Greek yogurt to it, you could potentially add some nuts or hemp seeds to it. Yes.
Is like cream cheese on toast, is that a good source of protein?
It's a little bit lower in like grams of protein, but it would be a good source of protein. I actually it's pretty much the same thing. Like, have you ever drained your yogurt into to make it a little bit thicker? Yeah, and then, yeah, exactly. And then you put a little za'atar on it or that's good. I might have that tomorrow.
The protein powder, it's a vegetable protein powder I get at Costco that I put in the smoothies. Is that a good source of protein?
That's a beautiful source. Yeah, so a protein powder would be a great example. And there are both plant-based proteins, which you're talking about, and then there would be whey, which would be an animal/dairy-based protein. That's usually the two big categories. Yes.
I hear people use the term more protein or less protein. How many grams of protein should we be eating?
Good question. So the question was, basically, some people just say more protein and less protein, but let's put some numbers on that to get an idea. The rule of thumb, and I'm going to start sort of like, I don't know, you'll see, you'll follow. As a rule of thumb, about if you were to take your body weight and multiply it by 0.8, that's the amount of protein that we should be getting per day. Protein is even more critical as we age. Oftentimes, I know it feels like a lot, right? So that's like the rule of thumb. Protein is going to help with blood sugar, which we're talking about here. It helps maintain muscle mass, right? There was an interesting, well, I think it's interesting. If you guys don't, it's okay. Interesting study that came out that took two groups of sedentary women, gave them the exact amount of calories, did not tell them to exercise, but one had the amount of protein I'm talking about, and one did not. In 3 months, the women that had more protein built muscle mass and lost body fat, and everything else was the same, right? So that is the kind of the importance of it. Now, rather than stressing out about getting, 130 a day, which probably seems like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to carry a calculator around and like, it's going to be my second job focusing on it. I would focus on, again, every time you eat, make sure it has a source of protein. And if it could be 20 to 30 grams, and I'll explain what that means, that would be fantastic. So what that looks like, if it is an animal protein, that's about 4 ounces. So that's a little bit bigger than the size of your hand. Okay, so that would be like half a chicken breast. You can have more than this. I'm just saying like a minimum. If it was dairy, it would be about a cup. A cup of Greek yogurt is about 20. It's a lot of Greek yogurt, but just FYI. It could be, let's see, a tablespoon of nut butter has about 7. So just to put that in perspective. So it's not nearly as high as some of these other sources. About a cup of beans or lentils would have about 20.
Eggs?
Eggs, 3.
On cheesy grams?
A cup. Three eggs, each egg has about 7 grams, so to get 20, you would need 3. But here's a different example. So let's say you had 2 eggs, right? 3 makes you want to throw up. It's way too many eggs, you know. Grains have it, and I don't want to overcomplicate it, but like a good whole grain bread is going to have some protein in it as well. So if you had 2 eggs, whole grain bread, maybe a little bit of yogurt or nut butter or cream cheese on it, beautiful breakfast. Beautiful.
And Tara, in eggs, all the protein is in the whites?
The vast majority of it is in the white. Correct.
And just to clarify, that palm, it's palm of your hand, how much was 4 to 5 ounces?
About the palm.
About the palm,
Yeah.
okay.
And
3 to 4 is palm.
Okay.
6 inches would, 6 inches.
Me-
6 ounces would be your whole hand.
You were mentioning milk before. How do you compare regular milk to almond milk?
So plant-based dairy, the question was, how do you compare regular milk to almond milk? And so I'm going to flesh that out and say, how do you compare, you know, animal dairy to plant-based dairy? Plant-based dairy doesn't really bring much to the table. It is perfectly fine. I put almond milk in my smoothie. It doesn't have any protein, right? Plant-based cheese does not have any protein. It's really a delivery system for other things, right? Now, there may be some that are fortified, but a cup of milk and a cup of almond milk would not be equal when it comes to that. And again, that doesn't mean almond milk is bad by any means. It just means that it's not going to be the source of protein in that meal.
What about soy?
Soy milk will have a little bit will have protein in it. Yeah.
are you supposed to, I was told that you have 30 grams of protein at any meal, that's about the maximum, and if you go 45, 50, 60, 70, then it's wasted because the body doesn't metabolize that much.
Yes, that is that was true. I had also said that throughout my career. Recently, we've learned that's not as accurate.
Oh.
So honestly, you know, and if you have kidney disease or things like that, please talk to me after this. That is going to be a different situation. But for most people, it's going to be very difficult to go. I mean, you're just going to get full before you overdose on protein. You're going to be like, ugh, egg white? No, thank you. But that's a great question. It's not as true as we thought it was before. You guys are smart.
And is it supposed to be that you eat most of your calories in the morning, and as you know, it's like that saying, you eat like a king for breakfast and dinner you eat like a pauper. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, if that works best for you, right? And so I would say, you know, it depends on your individual appetite.
Would you roll some of that question into your answer?
Yes, I'm sorry. So the question was, is it better to front load your day? So eat more early in the day, less at night. The phrase is eat like a king, breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, dinner like a pauper. Yeah. So if that works for you, I think that's beautiful. People's appetite doesn't always dictate that, and also social, right? There is like a logistical, social part of our lives as well. And so I personally kind of I typically do have lunch and dinner is about even, right? And then breakfast is maybe a little bit smaller, just because I told you how much I love my coffee, and that's probably what's happening there. But yes, if you can go like this rather than like that, then I think that's great. Wait, let me bring the microphone. Okay.
What are your thoughts on full fat versus low fat?
So I would say the question was full fat versus low fat, and you're probably speaking about like dairy, like yogurt, milk, things like that. I don't think so. We went through, and you guys all participated in our sort of low fat phase in our world, and that was well intended, and it didn't really work out quite the way that we wanted it to. And so I'm actually a fan of like with milk, 2% or whole, if you like it. You know, we've also been our taste buds have been conditioned from the low fat era. As long as there's not sugar added to it, I don't mind low fat, right? So like a mozzarella stick or things like that. I don't think it's a negative thing, but I also think that full fat is perfectly fine. To put it in perspective, full fat is about 4%. and fat-free is 0%. So it's not that big of a difference. Now, where I'm gonna put a little caveat with that is cholesterol. So if you're struggling with cholesterol, saturated fat, so this would be a little bit more in like the cuts of meats that you're eating, going higher fat, I would be careful with that. And we can talk specifically about cholesterol if that's interesting to you guys, but that's my only caveat with being careful with fat. Otherwise, I would go by your taste buds. I personally do low fat yogurt just because that's what they have at Costco, and it's delicious and it's plain and I like it. But I would never do a low fat cheese, for instance, because life is too short.
Can you speak to that a little bit more, your point? Because we recently were looking into this. It's very hard for me to break the habit of trying to eat low fat, right? And we need to welcome back fat into our lives. And I don't think we've had a chance to really talk about that much.
All right, let's talk about fat. So the well-intentioned idea behind fat-free, right? Behind the world of Snackwells and lean cuisines and things like that time in Diet Cokes, that time in our lives, was we had this sort of concept that if we didn't want to have a lot of fat, we shouldn't put a lot of fat into our bodies, right? Which kind of makes sense, it's the same word. But unfortunately, dietary fat is critical for a lot of our processes. It helps us absorb vitamins and minerals. It helps with our hormones. It helps with our satiety. It makes us full.
Keep in mind, Terry, you're talking to the generation that grew up rinsing down their Wonder Bread sandwich with whole milk.
We'll start doing that again, please. Sorry about those couple years in between where we got a little crazy. Go back to the whole milk. But basically, in our intention of taking fat out, we replaced it with sugar. And at the end of the day, sugar and ultra-processed carbohydrates are way more likely to be stored as fat than dietary fat. And so I get the desire to want to go low fat. If I were to tell you, which I can tell you right now, how I look at a food label, I rarely look at the fat content. I'm looking at protein content and I'm looking at fiber content for the most part. Because going low fat doesn't provide any value to me. I don't know if that explains that enough. Do you guys feel comfortable with that answer? Do you want me to dig in more?
Well, maybe just the healthy oils versus like healthy fat versus not healthy fat.
Yeah. So really when it comes to healthy versus unhealthy, it really depends on your perspective. What my answer to that would be fats found honestly from natural cooking sources, right? So things like olive oil, things honestly like butter. I don't want you having a lot of butter, but that if you're cooking with that, and I don't mean like butter, but if you're pan frying something and you want something that's heat resistant, a little bit of butter can be really heat resistant, got a little bit of flavor, and you can move on with your life. I would say other fats, nuts, avocado, fat in dairy, coconut oil, avocado oil. The unhealthy fats, trans fats. Now trans fats are basically found in very ultra processed food. Again, well intentioned. A trans fat is basically, they fully saturate it, so it makes things shelf stable, right? There's a reason that Twinkies will outlive us all. They are way more stable than we are. And unfortunately, you can almost think of it as they make the fats almost like hard. And then when we eat it, it like sticks places in our body. Yeah, sticks in our arteries. Now, trans fats are, they're not outlawed. They are places, but they're not found quite as much. And if you look at on the label, it will be listed on the label. So it's not as much of an issue as it was in the time of Snackwells and things like that.
But we want to get away from canola, vegetable oil that doesn't have vegetables in it. Yeah.
Seed oils. So that's kind of a big topic right now, right? Because so things like canola does actually have some heart health benefits to it. The problem is, the dose makes the poison, right?
What about olive oil?
Olive oil is great, right? And so things like more of these, like seed oils and things like that are just found in high doses in our diet. They're higher in omega-6 fatty acids, which can be kind of inflammatory. So increasing inflammation is really the downside of that. You know, honestly, if you were to cook with it at home, it wouldn't be the end of the world. I personally don't use it, but that's not gonna kill you, but it's just in very high volumes, mostly in ultra processed food.
I've heard over the years that rather than eating 3 heavy meals a day, it's better to eat like 5 meals spread out through the day. Of
Yeah,
course, it's not easy to do.
yeah. Well, I think you bring up a really good point. Figuring out something that's gonna work with your life, so change comes from consistency of action. So if you can't do it consistently, it's not gonna be super helpful. Where the idea of eating consistently throughout the day is, one, you're never that hungry and you're never that full, right? It does keep blood sugar stable, which is a lot of what we're talking about. And so if your blood sugar, if you are diabetic or your blood sugar is kind of going all over the place, that might be a great strategy. The downside is, man, it's nice to take a break from having to think about food for a little bit, right? It can also you can tend to overeat because, yeah, you're not starving, but you're not satisfied, right? So it is that. I personally find in my practice that most people thrive with 3 square meals a day and a snack where you need it, right? I think, and again, if you feel great having like grazing all day, I think it's wonderful. Just, you know, from a practicality standpoint, sometimes it's hard to be consistent. And again, you're constantly thinking like, oh my gosh, it's been 2 hours, I need to eat again, I need to eat again.
Tara, do you remember Bill Phillips, Body for Life guy?
Yeah,
Yeah, he talked about grazers versus gorgers. And he said that in nature, the grazers are the ones that are more lean and fit, and the gorgers are the ones that are obese, for lack of a better term. I mean, do you
Yeah.
think there's any value in that approach?
well, I think there's something in the middle, right? I think there's a different, like, those aren't the 2 options. It's not, you know, constantly eating and binge eating, right? It is, you know, kind of being proactive and preventative. But I also think that you should be able to not eat for about 4 hours and not feel like you're gonna die, right? And if that's not happening, then there is sort of like a blood sugar issue going on. So I do agree with that in like kind of big picture theory. In hands-on application, I do think that, you know, eating every 2 to 3 hours doesn't give your body a chance to rest from digestion. And there is a little bit of value in that. Now, again, if grazing works for you, I fully support it. We are all different. I do have clients that do graze all day and they thrive. I would say that the majority of my clients have 3 square meals and like a snack as they need it.
Are there benefits in intermittent fasting?
I think most people can benefit from a 12-hour fast, at least. Oh, wait, the question was, are there benefits
Yeah.
in intermittent fasting?
You mentioned something about having breakfast right away, as opposed to maybe if you eat at 6 at night, waiting and not starting till 11 in the morning. you know,
Yeah.
or that would be my idea of what and the reading that I've done on intermittent fasting, and I just have
Correct.
different views on it.
Yeah. So the question is different views on intermittent fasting. As always, if it's working for you, I fully support it. Most of the science and research is done with starting early and ending early.
Okay.
Right? So breaking your fast early in the day and stopping around 4, things like that. Again, we also need to function in society, right? And so figuring out if that works. And so I find that most people would benefit from taking a break from eating for 12 hours. Right? And so if your dinner
That's reasonable.
is at 6, you know, then don't eat till 6 in the morning. Now, I think you can go a little bit smaller, right? So maybe that would be a 12-hour fast, maybe like a 14-hour fast, I think is great. If you feel good doing something longer, wonderful. I don't think it's that necessary,
Okay.
right? So if that's just how your natural appetite goes, fantastic. If you're like, go to get to 11, then I would maybe stretch that out.
Too much.
Yeah, then I would stretch that out slightly.
Thank you.
I have a question about additives and like nitrates and processed food, because, you know, when you're looking for something really quick to eat, especially crackers, like I have such a hard time finding there's so much stuff added into them.
Yeah.
Especially, yeah, nitrates.
And so, so nitrates are typically added to lunch meats. That's usually where you're going to find nitrates. Now, a lot of nitrates are naturally occurring as well. And so opting for the nitrate free, I think is fantastic. Is your question on how to identify a
Well, yeah,
good
like,
cracker?
there's always a lot of like, when you have processed, there's so many things in there that I'm like, what is that? It's not a food.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, as a rule of
Very
thumb, I
highly
do think,
processed. Are
yeah.
there any ones that you should like totally avoid when you see something like hydrogenated, you know?
Hydrogenated, yeah.
blah,
So,
blah, blah?
yeah, so the question is, are there any crackers or additives or things that are on a label that you should steer clear of? Yes, if something has any hydrogenated oils, I would steer clear of it. That's a trans fat. That's probably the only thing that I would be 100% against. Honestly, and maybe this is an annoying answer, but I think Michael Pollan really kind of nailed it, where you want the ingredients list to be like probably not more than 5. Especially something as simple as a cracker, or peanut butter or something like that. And you should recognize all of the words, right? Like it might not be something you have in your cabinet. Maybe you don't have, ascorbic acid, which is vitamin C, but you're like, oh, it's vitamin C. I get it. And so as far as brands, which grocery store do you typically go to?
Just bonds or.
Yeah. So I would say, Simple Mills does a good job. They're expensive.
Yeah, the Costco.
They have them at Costco, yeah, they're very good. I had some this week. I would say that, gosh, I'm trying to think of other ones.
How about Crunch Master?
Crunchmaster, yeah, that's a great gluten-free that you can get at Costco.
Mary's crackers?
Mostly.
Mary's Gone Crackers is great.
Crunch Master.
Trader Joe's has their knockoff version, that's the same thing, that's a little cheaper. Those are all kind of simple whole grain crackers.
Getting back to the intermittent fasting,
Yeah.
there's been a lot of write-ups that it is healthy for us to lean that way.
Mhm.
But in your diagram there in the beginning of your screen, you showed how after that we drop down into the pink zone and we don't want to be there. So how is that for people that want to do this intermittent fasting?
That's a great question. Well, to be clear, we're all fasting on some level, assuming that you're sleeping, right? And so our bodies are designed to kind of handle that. What that sort of blood sugar roller coaster was, it really showed the repercussion from spiking too high, right? And so your blood sugar should be going up and down. If it's not, you're not alive, right? And so that's not the goal. But we want it to be like rolling hills. And so point being, when your blood sugar goes down, if you're in a rested or sleeping state, you don't really need that. I mean, you do need energy, but your body has some mechanisms to kind of deal with that. And so now, and this is getting a little bit into the weeds of it, but part of the thing with intermittent fasting is becoming fat adapted, so your body knows how to deal with starvation, right? And although that is a good thing in theory, in application, I don't think it's super necessary. Now, to your point, I would say specifically women in childbearing years, I would never recommend intermittent fasting for. Postmenopausal and men, I think you can get away with it without having a blood sugar drop. Now, it is important to figure out, and this is unique to every single person, does the ends justify the means, right? And so am I doing this because I feel like I'm thriving during it, right? Some people feel like $1 million with fasting. They're like, Tara, my head is clear. Other people are shaky and miserable and it's not working. And so I would do a little bit of a kind of quote unquote gut check with yourself. If you're spending the evening mentally consumed with food or avoiding social interaction until 11 because you can't eat, then that might not be worth it. Does that answer your question? I feel like I went a little bit all over the place with that, but it is kind of individual based. Yeah.
What about diabetic?
The question was, what about diabetics? I would be really careful. I would be very careful with that. Now, none of this needs to be an either or, right? And what I mean by that is, let's say your current way of eating is you wake up at 6, you have coffee and breakfast, and you're grazing until, 8 with your grandkids or something like that. You're like, gosh, that is a lot of day. It's a lot of eating. It doesn't mean that now I have to start fasting, but maybe you're like, maybe I'll stop a little bit earlier, right? Maybe I'll like do a little bit here and there. Maybe if you are diabetic and it's like, okay, let me get my blood sugar stable first, and then I can play around with that a little bit. It doesn't have to be you doing all the things at once. Sometimes stepping into something slowly will get you there faster than following someone else's rules. Does that answer make sense? Yeah.
One more cracker question.
Yeah.
What about the Blue Diamond Nut Thins? Are you a fan of those?
Yeah, I think that those are great as well. All of these things would need to be combined with the protein. But yeah, those are great.
So am I understanding that the blood sugar spikes are what ultimately lead to these pre-diabetes diagnoses? That's where it's coming from.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Hold on, wait, guys. Who's up first? Louise?
Forgive the math.
Yeah. I have an immune disease called systemic lupus. Is there anything special that I should be trying or not trying to do?
Yeah, so I would say the roots for autoimmune in general would be anti-inflammatory. And there is a full, very detailed anti-inflammatory protocol. But I would say big picture, and this would be like arthritis, this would be any sort of autoimmune. First, you want to think addition. And that, let me just take a step back. When you're thinking of nutrition in general, health benefits come from addition, not usually subtraction. We present nutrition as a subtraction problem, but it's really an addition problem. And we can go into a little bit more detail with that, but I always want you to be like, wait, what should I be adding? Because that's usually where the benefit comes from. Low carb, for instance, people take out carbs and they're like, oh, everything's awesome. It's usually because they've added protein and maybe they've added vegetables. So just sort of keep that in mind. So the addition part of autoimmune would be healthy fats. Think of cooling, right? So think of olive oils, think of avocado, think of, yeah, those would be probably the two best sources of healthy fats for you. Antioxidants. So that would think color. Antioxidants comes from mostly fruits and vegetables, but think like vibrant color
Purple
in
potatoes.
general. Purple potatoes.
Okinawa purple potato.
There you go.
Blueberries.
Now the things that would be kind of like throwing gasoline on the fire, unfortunately, is sugar in excess. I'm not saying you can never have sugar again or anything like that, but making sure that it's the exception, not the rule. The stuff we're talking about balancing blood sugar is going to be really helpful for that as well. Now, like I said, there is a full anti-inflammatory protocol that would pull out gluten. It would potentially pull out dairy. It would pull out a lot of different things. And if you are finding that you're flaring up a lot and it's really prohibitive to your life, then I do think it's worth going down that route. But I would start with that, and I think that you should notice a little bit of a difference. Is that helpful?
Those were basically things I already knew.
Awesome.
So,
Cool.
All
All right.
the sticking point for me though is the sugar.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't know it.
Yeah.
Well, in our Eating Well group, we do a lot of desserts. Can I have the mic? In our Eating Well group, we do a lot of desserts that are sweetened with like dates or maple syrup. As she was saying, the closer to the natural product that it is, the natural source, the less inflammatory and the less troublesome and the less spike that you get. So we can give you all kinds of recipes, dessert recipes with natural sugar. And would that be less of a problem?
It would be less of a problem, but where I would start with you is number one, remember most sugar cravings come from a diet that's too low in calories or too low in protein. So make sure you're eating enough and you're eating enough protein. I'm not saying that chocolate's going to taste gross if you're doing that, but there's a difference between the sugar screaming at you from the pantry and you being like, oh, this would be a nice thing to have, right? That sort of like body craving. So
I think I'm guilty of not having enough healthy fats.
Yeah.
Because I also bought into that era.
Yeah. So
I also bought into that era of low fat is good.
Exactly.
And I'm trying consciously to overcome that.
Yeah. And I think that's true. So that probably means that your total calories are down as well. Which I know seems counterintuitive. Like I don't want everyone swimming through like, 10,000 calories a day or something like that, but sometimes we can overcorrect. So I would start with that. And then I would sort of big picture, there are things that we eat because it brings us great joy. Food can be life-changing, right? And a lot of it is desperate, right? There's a big difference between you sharing a dessert with your friends and it's wonderful, and driving and being like, oh my gosh, there's a 7-Eleven. I'm not saying this happens, but that's sort of like desperate reactive eating and pleasurable eating. And so then I would get into the weeds. Yes, they're both sugar, but they're very different. The idea of healthy nutrition is not to get rid of these joyful, wonderful times. It's to get rid of that stuff that we're doing just out of habit. We're doing because it's easier than making lunch or things like that. So that may or may not apply to you, but sometimes I think getting into the weeds of the way that we're relating to certain sweets or pleasurable food can be really, really empowering.
Thank you.
Uh-oh, what's going on over here?
My question's about, again, fat again. I'm using safflower oil for cooking and for salad dressings. Is that a good or bad fat?
I would recommend maybe switching to an olive oil.
Oh,
I
yeah,
think a lot of the fats like that, we used to encourage them because we felt they were more heat resistant. And we kind of learned that that wasn't 100% true.
Yeah.
So I would try and do a more heat resistant olive oil at room temperature. So in the salad dressing, it's gonna have beautiful health benefits. And it's fine for cooking. You can also do an avocado oil for cooking.
Yeah, well, I use a lot of olive oil, but I also have a safflower for the high temperature cooking.
And so that is a great intention. Like I said, if we were having this conversation a couple years ago, I would agree with you. But there's been some really great new studies that now we understand that safflower oil isn't as heat resistant as we thought. So I would just maybe get rid of it and just do olive oil and just make it simple.
Is avocado high heat?
Avocado is very high heat. Yeah, so that is, if you're doing like stir frying or things like that, I would go avocado.
This
Yes.
is an embarrassing statement,
I
but
know, I
what
can
if,
hear you guys fighting about who was gonna
Well,
ask.
yeah,
Right, well,
what
you can
if,
say it's your friend that
what if
told you
your
to ask this
husband
question.
wants to have ice cream every night?
Say this
Hypothetically, a husband somewhere wants to have ice cream every night. I don't know, I think it's, everything we're talking about is kind of.
lot, but it's ice
Well, there's that creamy, that machine that makes protein ice cream.
Yeah.
Sure.
You can make your own ice cream,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that is not a whole bunch of calories, and then you're getting protein.
It doesn't sound good.
It's good. It is good though.
It's pretty good, okay.
It's good.
So, do you want my honest answer to that? Okay. Honest, if you're having it after a meal, it's probably not gonna spike your blood sugar as much as if you were having it completely by itself. I'm not saying ice cream is a health food, but I also think that the way that we relate to food and the joy that we get from things in the community, I think that there is a health benefit to that too. And so if your blood sugar is good, if your cholesterol is good, if all these things are coming back and it's like, all right, you're doing pretty good, having like a little bit of ice cream, please enjoy it. If those things are starting to creep up, a little bit, yeah. If those things are starting to creep up, then it's good to check in to say, okay, ice cream is delicious, but what's the most important part of this? Is it a treat at the end of the day? Could maybe I put something else there? Is it connection? A lot of food is connection, so or whoever these people are, this husband probably likes sitting with his wife and having ice cream, hypothetically. In which case it's connection. You could also, and I know it's about to get darker earlier,
It is.
moving after food helps regulate blood sugar, right? So you could also have some ice cream and go for a walk. That could help as well. And so big picture, again, it's the dose makes the poison. So if it is a little bit, and the rest of our body responds to what we do consistently. So as long as the rest of the day is pretty good, you're probably gonna be okay.
Is there a max amount of sugar? Should we be counting our sugar? Teaspoons or grams or anything like that?
Yeah, so added sugar, the max per day is, per the RDAs, is I think 45. I find most people would probably be better more around like 25. That's added, right? That's not fruit. That's not things like that. That's things that would be, I mean, things like honey, that would count as added. So that's what I would say with that.
Okay, so I'm one of those that don't want to cook. I
Yeah,
don't want to stand there. I don't want to make my own ice cream. I don't. So, yeah. Yeah, so, are there any plans out there that I don't even have to cook? They're already prepared and I stick them in a microwave
Oh,
or I
there's
put
a
them in the
ton.
oven that you would recommend?
yeah. So there's a fair amount of meal delivery places. Gosh, you could do, well, one, Sunbasket's kind of nice because it has the microwave meals, but it also has like meal kits. So if you felt like doing that. Some things that are, and I'll go into the ones you can order, local, or not locally, but things that you could find at regular grocery stores. Kevin's Meals, have you guys ever seen those?
I love them.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Kevin's Meals has, that is just the protein, but he also has microwavable meals that you get at Sprouts. That's a really balanced meal and it's good protein. And from a price point, it's a little bit less expensive than the meal deliveries. In San Diego, there's a local plant-based one that is plant-based meals now, if you do want to lean vegetarian. And let's see. Gosh,
Does
there
that
really
mean we're
are so
moving
many.
into lunch now?
Ah.
We get breakfast up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Eat like a king is right, or breakfast like a king.
Is blue carrot a good one? I think I've heard
Blue
about.
carrot's a great
Blue
one.
carrot, okay. You
Yeah.
can get those at different places too, right? Yeah. Blue
Purple
carrots.
carrot? I don't know.
Yeah.
What kind of carrot?
Purple carrot has frozen meals now too, they're also meal kits.
Then she said purple.
Yeah. Yeah, don't eat that blue one. When I'm looking at stuff like that, I mean, obviously I want quality ingredients and things like that, but from a number standpoint, if I'm looking at a serving, ideally, like I said, I want 20 to 30 grams of protein. And then I'm looking at the calories of the serving. So I would say probably most people here, probably like 400 to 500 for a meal, depending on how active you are, would be a good serving size. And that doesn't mean if it's a meal kit and it's larger than that per serving, you can't eat it, but maybe it makes 3. Right? Or maybe even like microwave meals sometimes are like a joke with the amount of calories that it has. So it's like, okay, well, let me add a salad to this, or let me chop up some avocado and add to it.
Oh, yeah.
You guys are doing good with questions. Yeah.
You haven't touched on sodium?
I haven't touched on sodium. I wasn't going to, but I will.
I'm supposed to be eating but they brought me back. It wasn't your
So happy you
time.
did.
Now I watch it very carefully, and
Yeah.
I heard somewhere that the average American consumes, I don't know if it was 25,000 milligrams of sodium a day or 2,500, but they only need 1,500 a day.
Yeah, if you have high blood pressure, the goal is to be around 1,500. Without high blood pressure, around 2,500. Americans consume a lot more than that. Now sodium is kind of tricky because it's typically the sodium found in more processed foods, right? So it's kind of like, is it the salt or is it the delivery system? Kind of the same thing with seed oil. Is it the seed oil or is it that it's on your Big Mac, right? Like which came first? For you, absolutely steer clear of it. And so things like microwave meals, things honestly eating out, you have to be careful with. I would say if you're looking at a package, it should have, and you're looking at the percentage, it should have definitely less than 20% of your daily value. For the average person, I do think sodium is very important, and I do want you to be mindful of it. It is typically found, honestly, it's oftentimes found in carbohydrates. So like breads, pastas, things like that. It is definitely found in eating out. I mean, we could go to PF Chang's right now and you could have enough sodium for the next year and a half. It is found in sauces, right? So being careful with that. Also, flushing it out, right? So sodium coming into you is one thing, getting it out of you is a big thing, right? We get it out through urination, so staying hydrated to make sure you're going to the bathroom, and when you get out through sweat. So exercising, moving, getting all sweaty.
Well, I don't do the sweating anymore.
Yeah. Fair enough, fair enough.
Well, my insulation. It dropped
We'll do
away
some
and-
sprints afterwards. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, what if you wake up in the middle of the night, at like 2 or 3? And
Yeah.
you feel like you need something,
Yeah,
but you want to go back to sleep?
yep.
What should you do?
I would have something protein and fat based, right? So if that happens consistently, and this is probably not what you want at 2 o'clock in the morning, I would have like a little thing of nuts, or yogurt or things like that. I would avoid having something like well, too big, because that our bodies aren't good at digesting and doing other things at the same time. For the most part, they're good at multitasking, but not like digestion. That's why, I don't know, maybe your parents said don't eat right before bed because it'll give you nightmares, or don't go in the pool after you eat. Because our bodies aren't great at that. So in the middle of the night, anything else might wake you up more than you need. So if those things sound good, then I would do something along those lines. You can also try having maybe a little protein shake, you know, like the Costco makes Orgain, even half of one. Having something protein and fat based before you go to bed could keep your blood sugar stable throughout the night, right? You can think back to, I don't know if any of you had, would wake up in the middle of the night when you were pregnant, right? And be starving, or wake up with morning sickness. Oftentimes that was a blood sugar thing. And so having protein beforehand might keep you going throughout the night. So I would try both of those strategies. All right, do you guys want to talk about lunch, or are we
No,
gonna
one
just
more.
start with breakfast
One more.
today? It's okay.
On salt. So my favorite thing is salt. I could
Me
sit
too.
down, to a bag of potato chips and
We
eat
could
the
go,
chocolate,
you
right?
wanna go have some like Mexican?
Yes, let's. So for snacking at night, or how do you get rid of that salt craving?
Mhm.
You know, is there something to eat that, short of pickles, because that was one of them. I don't like sour.
Yeah.
So, do you have a suggestion for that?
Well, I would say, I mean, to make sure that you actually are getting enough salt throughout the day, and I know this is counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but you know, we don't typically get too much salt from like putting salt on our home cooked meals, right? That's not the issue. It usually is the more, oh, but you don't like to cook, which is fine. So I would make sure that you are hydrated. You could potentially add an electrolyte drink to your day. Which brand do you use?
The naturopathic doctor gave me one.
Perfect. Like an over the counter one, it just.
No, comes from Full Script, so.
Okay, so that actually might solve that problem.
Okay.
Some of it also, and I'm with you, I love salt. I would swim, I could say goodbye to sugar for the rest of my, I mean, I wouldn't want to, but I could, but I couldn't say goodbye to chips. You could also do things that have like the illusion of salt, right? So for instance, maybe they have some spices or some herbs on it. You could do like toasted chickpeas with a bunch of like, I don't know what your flavor palette is, but you could do like some like Indian spices or something, like something that has like a lot of flavor, or even like a low sodium ranch type thing. So it's kind of tricking you, because you would assume that has a lot of salt and it's crunchy. You may be craving kind of like the ritual and the oral fixation part of it even more than the sodium, even though that's what you desire.
You're right, I do like to chew on something, watching television.
Totally, yeah. So toasted chickpeas, I mean, I don't know, maybe you'll hate them, but.
What is it? Celery.
I can
No.
Yeah.
Chickpeas are good.
Yeah, chickpeas are good. They're also good because you can't eat them too fast, or else they'll get super pasty. Do you guys want to talk about lunch?
Yes.
Moving on.
Or, oh wait, snacks. No, it's breakfast snacks. Oh, look, here's a recipe. I forgot where we were. So here's an example of peanut butter oatmeal. So this has some oatmeal, peanut butter, things like that. You'll have access to these things, or these are all on my website, so you can find them. You don't have to memorize it. If you could go to the next one.
How do you put the peanut butter in the oatmeal?
Just go and drizzle it in. It'll be warm, so it'll kind of melt
Heat it
in.
up first.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah. Or this is a smoothie. It just has water or like a milk, like almond milk or regular milk, spinach, some fruit, Greek yogurt. I put some oats in this one. You have to have a good blender, or else it's gonna be not good, not great. And then some chia seeds and cinnamon. Okay, you wanna go to the next one? Snacks. Okay, so snacks is the other place where we kind of forget about protein in general. So snacks should have a carb and a protein. I would always recommend having non-perishable items. in a perfect world, of course, I want you guys eating all organic and home cooked and, you know, it's butterflies and rainbows everywhere. Yes. But in my world, if you were to go through my purse right now, which I would not recommend, you would probably find a packet of trail mix from Trader Joe's. You would probably find a Kind Bar. It's going to live in there for quite some time. And one day it's going to save my life. And so non-perishable is quick and easy. Always do like a mental reset, like, gosh, am I eating too many Kind Bars? Probably. Maybe I can go back to an apple and string cheese, right? So going back to whole foods is my ideal, but I want things that are like kind of your backup plan. When it comes to nuts and things like that, I would do pre-portioned. Just to cut the mental load out of it. You guys have the capacity to stop yourselves from eating, but it's easy to overeat nuts,
Yeah.
especially when they're salty.
Yeah.
And as a snack, about 200 calories tends to be a good portion size. Oftentimes we have these 100 calorie snacks, and if they make you satisfied, bless you, keep using them. Oftentimes they just remind me that I'm hungry and then I end up eating a lot more. So usually 200 calories tends to satisfy. Okay, should we go to the next one? So these are just some examples of the protein portion. So nuts, nut butter, hard-boiled eggs, yogurt, hummus, cheese or string cheese, edamame is a great one, hemp seeds, and then bars. So let's talk about bars for a second. Let's go to the next one.
So many bars.
Okay, when I am looking at a bar, one of my sort of quick rules of thumb is I'm looking down here, I'm looking at the protein, fiber, and sugar, okay? And so I want a bar that either has more fiber than sugar or more protein than sugar, okay? Because sugar is not evil, it's just when it's isolated and by itself. So remember, protein and fiber are the speed bumps. And so what this says to me is this is gonna make me satisfied. This is gonna make me full because it has the satiety of protein and fiber. Now, typically it's unusual that both are higher unless it's artificially sweetened, which we can talk about that as well. But if it is a natural sugar, usually it'll have more protein or more fiber than sugar, because usually it's like a protein bar or a fiber bar. But this is, I think this is the dark chocolate and sea salt Kind Bar, is what this is. I do not work for Kind. I don't know why I keep talking about it so much. Maybe I want one, but does that make sense as kind of like a quick thing to scan?
That's good.
Yeah.
I think it's sugar that I've seen on there, though, say X amount of grams of sugar plus additional X amount of grams.
Yes. So the question was, there's typically a line item under sugar that says total sugars and added sugar.
Right.
Correct? Okay. So basically added sugar would be things like cane sugar. It would be even things like honey and stuff like that. If it's sugars with not, it's naturally natural sugars like that found in fruit or dairy. It is still sugar, right? So it doesn't turn into broccoli. It is still sugar, but it tends to process a little bit better. Having said that, I would still use this rule of thumb because too much of a good thing is also.
We try to avoid it.
Yeah.
So is that a good example?
Could you elaborate on the distinction between total carbs and dietary fiber?
Yeah, so total carbohydrates is basically fiber, sugar, and starches all added up. So that's what that line item is total carbohydrates. Now,
So where's the other 5 come from in that example?
starch, it's just not a line item, okay? So that's what makes up a carbohydrate. Now, when I'm looking at a bar, now this would also hold true for potentially cereals or crackers or anything I'm having by itself for the most part. I want there to be either more fiber than sugar or protein than sugar, right? Unless it's a candy bar and then I'm just eating candy, right? But if I'm hungry and I want that problem to be solved, when I'm done with this bar, I do not want to be hungry anymore. One of those two things needs to be higher than sugar. Yes.
Thank you. A little bit more about honey, because somewhere or other, sometime in the past, maybe, I read that honey is a complete food, that you actually could live off honey. And consequently, I eat honey every day, but now it sounds like the way you're describing it, it's a source of sugar, so it might be a negative thing. So I wonder if you could kind of flesh that out in
Yeah.
terms of because since I have it on a regular basis and I've talked other people into having, and I've started a bunch of honey badgers out there and maybe I'm leading them astray. So maybe.
Yeah, we're gonna look you up. Yeah, I'm just
Maybe
kidding.
we could-
Honey's beautiful, right? Honey, is a great source of nutrients. It's a great way to, especially if you do like local honey, it helps with allergies. It does beautiful, wonderful things. It is possible to eat too much honey. It's not as likely as to eat too much like table sugar. But yeah, even too much of a good thing, like there's a limit to anything, right? And so absolutely, I would love for you to be adding honey to your oatmeal or yogurts. It's way better than table sugar or some processed something or other. So I think it's fantastic. There also is a limit on the quantity, right? You know, maybe in one sitting, you don't want to have more than like a tablespoon of it. Does that answer your question, or is that not specific enough?
No, that's adequate. Thank you. very
Yeah, and
much.
I mean, I think as kind of a rule of thumb, and sometimes, and this doesn't apply to you necessarily, but we really want things to be either good or bad, right? That makes life easier. That's why a lot of diets are presented that way. You know, man, there's a freedom in saying, I don't eat carbs, or I don't eat orange things, or I don't do this, right? Because it is very black and white. But a lot of it is recognizing, you know, the purpose that it's serving, and that we eat food as a whole, not just nutrients, right? I mean, if you came in here and you were like eating a jar of honey, just hanging out, and you know, maybe having a hemp seed here and there, we'd be having a different conversation. But it is a beautiful nutrient, so I think adding it to something is wonderful, and you can tell your little hive that
In fact, one of them went out and bought a case. I guess I was persuasive. He went out and he bought a case of honey. So
well, if I need to sell something, I'm gonna call you. I'm gonna be like, tell them about my new product. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so sneaky signs of hunger. Oftentimes I'll be talking to people and they're like, but Tara, I don't really get that hungry or anything like that. And I ask them, what does hunger feel like? And get a lot of interesting questions. Well, typically it's a lot of interesting answers. Typically it's like, you know, hungry. That's my most common reply to that. But usually people will say like stomach growling or shaky or things like that. And that is definitely hunger, but that's a pretty advanced form of hunger. And so oftentimes there's little things that are that we don't associate with it that are signs. Easily frustrated. I used to think that, I mean, hangry is obviously hungry, but like I used to think that all my clients around 11 a.m. were just terrible people and so difficult. And then I started having a snack and it turns out they were lovely and I was the problem. And so if there are times or day that you become a little bit more apathetic or things become a little bit harder, I'm not pretending like food's going to solve all problems, but I started having a bite of a little something and I noticed a change. So experiment with that. Trouble concentrating, like if things become a little bit harder, if you start getting a little mentally consumed with food, right? If you start obsessing about it a little bit, and then headaches and depression. Again, broccoli does not solve all problems, but under eating can make you feel emotionally heavier. So just use it as an experiment. You know, you may find, gosh, it's kind of interesting when I have, you know, my handful of nuts, things feel a little bit easier. So keep that in mind. Next one. Some energy supplements you can click through 3 times. So B vitamins are really important in general. Obviously check with your doctor in all of these, although these shouldn't impact any meds. B vitamins, if you think of like your adrenal system, your stress system, as an army that shoots down stress, B vitamins is like the ammo, and so it can help a little bit. Now we do get B vitamins from food. You'll get it from animal protein, you'll get it from fruits and vegetables. But if you do find energy dropping, you can talk to your doctor about potentially adding a B vitamin. Superfood powder is high in B vitamins. tastes like grass. I don't know if you really want to do that, but, and then magnesium. Now, magnesium is something that I do want to talk about. Magnesium is a relaxer, and you can associate low levels of magnesium with things you associate with tension, trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep, eye twitch, leg twitch, soreness, things like that. Anything that does this, magnesium does this. We get magnesium from our soil, and then the magnesium goes into our produce mostly, and then we eat it and everything's awesome. But most of us probably don't eat as much produce as we should, and a lot of our soil is overcropped just from farming practices. And so I do find that a lot of people benefit from a magnesium glycinate prior to bed. I take this. The form is important. So magnesium citrate, if you struggle with constipation, is a good one. If you do not struggle with constipation, you do not need it. You will only take it once. But it is, the reason I say prior to bed is not because it's gonna put you to sleep. If you were to take it now, you wouldn't fall asleep unless you're terribly bored with me. But you should have more of those mornings where you wake up and you're like, oh, I mean, this could actually help with keeping you awake throughout the night if it isn't hunger. I mean, waking up at 2 is also a sign of processing stress and things like that, right? Not that your life is stressful, but you're participating in the world and whatever, it's weird right now. And so this should be more of those mornings where you wake up and you're like, oh, that was helpful. But again, some soreness and things like that, it can be really helpful with.
So how do you take it?
Glycinate. And this is not something you need to spend a lot of money on. You need to be careful with supplements, but magnesium is a very clean mineral.
What about for Charlie horses? And that, yeah.
Yeah. Magnesium, potassium, and hydration are usually like the trifecta when it comes to like leg cramping in the night. But this should help with that a lot. If any of you have ever soaked in Epsom salts before, that's magnesium that comes through your skin, right? So that's why it kind of goes like this. But this is just, like I said, I personally keep a bottle next to my bed, a bottle of water next to my bed, and I take it as I'm going to sleep. And that's just from a compliance standpoint.
So can you buy them at Costco? Or anywhere?
Costco, Amazon, Sprouts.
Is this
Yeah.
the
It's
Calm?
a capsule. Calm, checked, who said that?
me over here?
Calm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Calm is magnesium.
Oh.
Look at the back and check the form.
Okay.
Sometimes it is a different form, which doesn't make it bad. It's just not as bioavailable, so you may not absorb it as well.
Where do you get yours?
Ask your doctor before you take it because of any other drugs you're on.
It doesn't usually counteract anything that I've ever done research on, but always shoot your doctor an email and be like, hey, thoughts about this.
Sprout sells a good magnesium potassium blend.
What's that?
Sprout sells a good magnesium potassium blend.
Great. Yeah, that would be perfect. That would probably be great for your Charlie horse. Check the version, the type of magnesium.
I'm seeing you have like 400 milligrams to set the maximum.
It's actually a pretty low dose. So I usually start people 400 to 500. I have some people up to like 1200, and that's still less than our daily, what we need in a day. Please email me if you're gonna do that, but usually feel very safe starting anywhere between 3 and 5.
Do I have to have a ratio to my calcium and magnesium? Or can I just take as much magnesium as I want?
The question is if there needs to be a ratio with calcium and magnesium. So calcium and magnesium are a team. And specifically magnesium helps calcium absorb.
Oh.
And so typically people like to do either 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 ratio of calcium to magnesium. In this case, since it's specific for magnesium being a relaxer for other symptoms, I'm not as worried about that ratio. But if you're taking a calcium and magnesium pill, I would want them typically twice as much calcium as magnesium. So if you're taking 500 magnesium, it would be 1000 calcium.
Hey, Tara.
Yeah.
We're just at 3 o'clock, and if you don't mind continuing, that would be great. Does anyone need to depart at 3? Okay, I just wanted to let you know. It was 3.
Okay.
That's great.
I think we're almost done with the slides.
Sorry,
So,
I loved your talk.
I don't
Can't
think
wait
it's-
till the next one.
Yeah, I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Okay.
Take your time. Take your time.
You say we're gonna get done with the slides?
With this, yeah, we're almost done with the presentation.
Yeah.
I have to go because I'm getting hungry.
What you gonna eat? Protein. All right. Hydration. Hydration helps with energy as well. And again, oftentimes I struggle with hydration. I mean, you see, I have a water bottle with me. Oftentimes I carry it around with me like it's part of my outfit and don't even pay attention to it. But it is water is the foundation of almost every processes in our body. So if we don't have enough water, all things don't work as well. But oftentimes thirst is usually what people go by, and usually that means that you're dehydrated. Again, trouble concentrating, hunger. Oftentimes we confuse hunger and thirst. Weight gain or bloat. Big weight fluctuations are usually a hydration issue. Dry skin and hair, drop in mood and fatigue. Sometimes just if you get to the point that you're just, I think of the summer, right? Think of like yawning, just because it's hot outside. That's usually dehydration. Do you want to go to the next slide?
One question on hydration, is that half your body weight in ounces per day? Is that a good formula?
Yeah, if you can get to it, right? I typically say, well, wherever you are now, build from there. If you're drinking like 2 glasses a day, please don't jump to 8 because you're gonna be in the bathroom all day long. You're not gonna get sleep. You're not gonna be able to see your friends. So kind of build, but yeah, I would say most people do well with about 64 ounces. And so using that, if that's way too much, please don't jump up to that, but that's usually a good starting point. Now, if you're active and sweating, you would want to go even higher, but the goal to your point would be half your body weight in ounces.
Can I ask it, what about not only water, but herbal teas or?
That would count. I would say the question is if other things count as water, like herbal teas. I would say anything that's decaffeinated would count as water. So that could be an herbal tea, that could be a sparkling water. We do get water from fruits and vegetables. So a lot of people that are eating a lot of fruits and vegetables aren't as thirsty, right? And so that does count. It's just harder to quantify.
So 64 ounces a day, that is eating a little over 12-ounce glasses.
Yeah.
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 Seems like a lot. Maybe it's not if you pace yourself.
Yeah, it would be 2 of these.
It's 8 ounce, right?
Mhm.
I was going by 12 ounces.
Yeah, they're pretty small. That's not too much.
Yeah, so like a coffee mug tends to be about 12 ounces.
Yeah, that's what I go
Mhm.
by the big flat.
Yeah, if that feels like a ton, if you're like, I'm doing about 2 of those a day, try to do 3 and see what it feels like. Again, if you're peeing all the time and you're like, I see no value in this, trust yourself, right? But I do think that you'd be surprised that it can, specifically cognitively, it can impact mental acuity and things like that. Okay, so it's not what you drink, it's what you absorb. So how many of you start drinking more water and then spent the whole day in the bathroom? It's going right through you. And so electrolytes are the minerals that we talked about earlier. They're the vitamins and minerals that your body uses to absorb. Historically, we would get our water from a babbling brook and it would be going over rocks and dirt and we would drink it and everything was awesome. Now we purify our water, thank goodness, but usually the good stuff goes out as well. So adding electrolytes is great. A lot of water comes with electrolytes in it now. You will pay for it and they'll be advertising all over the front of it. Smart Water is an electrolyte water. Palomar Springs actually might put electrolytes back in their water. I'm not 100% sure, but there are electrolytes that you can add. So Ultima is a great one. Coconut water has natural electrolytes in it. Sprouts will have trace minerals that doesn't have any flavor. There's a lot of ones out there, but if you find that you're feeling dehydrated and you are drinking enough water, or you literally feel like it's going right through you, you drink a glass of water and within 20 minutes you have to pee, I would try adding some of this. Now, be careful, these do have sodium in it, so you do have to be aware of it. Typically, unless they're real high sodium versions, they're not going to be that much, but just keep that in mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I use that. I have a reverse osmosis system. Does that take the electrolytes out?
It does.
Or, oh, okay.
Yeah. It's a great system.
I'm not getting any electrolytes then.
Yeah, so you could, if you go to like Sprouts or something, and get trace minerals, it's in like a blue container. Just put a couple drops in. You're gonna taste it.
But-
It actually may taste like softer. Have you guys had water and you're like, ooh, it feels silky?
Yeah.
That's usually, it'll have the electrolytes in it.
It does with, the system I have, it puts minerals back in.
Oh,
It
then
remineralizes. Does that
then
mean
that's it.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, so I'm getting electrolytes.
You're great then, yeah. All right, do you want to go to the next slide? Oh, here's a homemade one you could do with some water and watermelon, some mint leaves, some lime, and a little bit of salt. So, and this is the last thing, I know it's going long and you guys are getting antsy. Meal planning, right? And people roll their eyes when I say that, because when I say meal planning, you think you have to like cook for like 6 hours on a Sunday and like buy containers and then you have to like take pictures of it and brag about it. You certainly can, but that's meal prep. So meal planning is simply recognizing that you're gonna get hungry and having a solution for it. Eating is awesome. Figuring out what to eat, getting it and putting it in your body is kind of a pain, right? And oftentimes we can avoid it until we're in the pink blob and then we're hangry and then we end up ordering typically what's quick and easy, right? That may not be in our best interest. And so what I like to do is I like to think of like a plan A, plan B, plan C for my meals, right? So maybe my plan A for breakfast is, it is Monday, I feel great, I'm gonna make some eggs and throw some veggies in there and have a whole grain piece of toast and everything's awesome. Maybe your plan B is, guess who doesn't feel like dealing with that? I have pre-made protein shake and an apple. And maybe your plan C is, I'm gonna pop into Starbucks and get some egg bites, right? So you have a solution based on your capacity, based on your desire, but the decision's been made. It's kind of like structured flexibility. Now, to be clear, if a family member calls or a friend calls and they're like, meet me for breakfast, please go. This isn't about restricting you, this is about giving you mental freedom, right? Because clearly you all care about what you're eating, you would not be here. And sometimes that desire to do a really good job can almost make us feel worried about eating, right? And so having a plan of action is to free your brain up, right? And you can go in and reevaluate it and say, I'm sick of this, or actually I went to the doctors and I'm gonna try and get more of this. And please do that, but I think that sort of plan A, plan B, plan C, so you can alleviate the mental load of healthy eating, because that can be pretty high. I think that might be it. Next slide. Okay, action items. Remember that a lot of your sugar and carb cravings come from a diet that's too low in calories or protein. So when you are having a craving, you clearly don't want protein in that moment, but think that that's going to actually solve that problem. One rule of thumb is every time you eat, have something from the carb group and something from the protein group. And remember, breakfast and snacks is typically where that falls short. You can consider adding an energy boosting supplement. And if you find that you are dehydrated, I would add in an electrolyte drink or a half of one each day and see how it feels. Okay. I think that's it. Is that it?
Did I miss the slide about booze?
Yeah, we don't talk about that till 5. I think that might be it. Yeah. You guys have any more questions? I loved it. Anything else?
Any more questions?
You're
Yeah.
good.
People talk about ice cream.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm telling myself a liar.
Yeah, you
But,
can say your friends.
Instead of ice cream, we eat smoothies that we make just with frozen bananas and frozen strawberries or blueberries or mangoes or something.
Yeah, like a sorbet kind of thing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's what we eat.
And
It's all
like ice cream, it
fruit.
tastes like
Oh, you
ice
have to
cream.
put some almond milk in it to make it so it grinds up in the Vitamix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know we're not getting any fiber because the Vitamix takes care of that, I think.
Let's talk about that. That's actually not true. So
But
if
is
you
that
are-
better than ice cream?
Yes, if you are blending, you're actually maintaining the fiber. If you're juicing, you're taking it out. So you are still getting fiber in there. Now, you're right. Sometimes when you blend, you are probably eating more fruit than you would eat normally. right? Like you probably wouldn't sit down and have like a banana and berries and, you know. And so the delivery system makes a little bit faster. So it may be, yeah, it is higher in sugar, right? Than maybe you would normally eat, but it's better than ice cream without a doubt. You could try if you wanted to. You could mix some yogurt into that, just add a little bit of protein. It might make it kind of creamy. Instead of the almond milk. The almond milk is fine, but that would add a little bit more nutrition into it. You could try adding some peanut butter powder. That can make it like a little bit of a different flavor. But I think that that's a great ice cream alternative.
About peanut butter ice cream.
The question is peanut butter ice cream? Yeah, it's essentially a salad.
Something's better than ice cream.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions?
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome.